This morning I've come to a location called Port Cornay, which sits on the east coast of the Isle of Man, and it's a gorgeous morning, crystal clear skies. I don't know if you can see them above me there, not too much wind, and the sea just behind me here is like a mill pond. There's hardly a wave to be seen, so flat and calm, and that's going to lend itself really well in the location I'm shooting in, which is basically a little rocky sort of cove, and you've got this little building at the far end of the bay there, and that acts as a brilliant focal point here. And it's not actually a location I've taken images of before, so I'm really looking forward to this morning. And what I'm hoping to capture is a nice calm sunrise image with that building there, the sun rising out that sort of direction. I've got about an hour to go to sunrise, so I'm gonna have a little wander around here and see if I can work out the shooting angle. Going to have to forgive me, this morning is very rushed indeed. The light levels are changing rapidly and the tide is receding rapidly, so that makes for quite a tricky proposition to try and get my images and record it all at the same time. I have got one image so far, and it's kind of a blue hour shot. I really like the lighting conditions we were getting this morning with this clear sky. So you see my camera set up just here, and I focused down on these foreground boulders you can see just behind me here and position them sort of down, sort of bottom left in the scene. And then the little cottage you can see maybe out this direction, I positioned that in the right of the composition. Relatively straightforward, but I took two different creative approaches to it. The first approach was to stop my aperture down and use base ISO, therefore sort of achieving a shutter speed of about 30 seconds, which allowed me to polish off this water surface completely and go for a more sort of minimalistic kind of shot. And then I also tried raising my ISO to about 500 and opening my aperture to about f8, which gave me a shutter speed of about 1 second approximately, to create and capture a bit more dynamic movement along the shoreline. I'm not entirely sure which creative approach I prefer. I can see the merits in both, but yeah, I guess you'll see up on screen any moment now which one I preferred. But yeah, all in all, it's a nice start to the day. But the sun is going to be rising in about half an hour out that direction, and I'm still not 100% certain what composition I want to go for that, because I've been too busy messing around with this. So I'm going to have to stop filming now and run around like an idiot to try and decide how to capture this rising sun. Unfortunately, a thick band of cloud moved in and ruined the sunrise completely. So this blue hour image proved to be the only shot from the morning. As you can see, my preference ended up being for the longer exposure, smoothing out the sea. I felt this worked best and ultimately fitted the crisp and cool blue hour winter atmosphere that I was aiming for. The image is focus stacked and exposure blended, with one image focused down on the foreground rock, a second focused on the background cottage, and a third underexposed background to capture the pre-dawn colours and avoid blowing highlights over on the right hand side. I'm pleased how the images turned out, but slightly disappointed that I didn't realise my sunrise vision for the scene. The day was far from over though, so I was hopeful for some better luck later on. Not to be put off from the disappointment this morning, I am back out to see if I can squeeze any more landscape photography out of today. Now, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it earlier in the video, but today is Christmas Eve, so it feels quite fitting to try and get some wintry snow shots. And you can see just kind of all around me here, we've got a pathetic, measly amount of snow down on the ground. One of the downsides on living on a tiny island in the middle of the mild Irish Sea is that we don't really get very severe wintry cold conditions here, so snow's quite a rarity. But thankfully today, I don't know if you can see that just behind me, but this is the highest peak on the island called Snaefell, and it does actually have a bit of a wintry cap on it at the moment. So the plan is today to follow the tramway that you can see just behind me here, all the way up to the top of the mountain there, and capture some nice sunset images. The sun is just setting over that direction at the moment, and I've got about 2 hours, so I should have plenty of time to get up there and hopefully find some compositions. As I climbed higher up the mountain, I was really taken back by just how bitingly cold it was, particularly in the increasingly oppressive wind. Rather than push onwards to the highly exposed summit, I decided to double back on myself and focus my photographic attention onto the tramway itself, which I had just walked along. For some reason, I'm really struggling today. I don't know whether I'm just overthinking my shots, but as good as this landscape is behind me, you can see the snowy slopes here and the pylons going off into the distance down the tramway. As good as that is, I just really struggled, and I've been trying to work in the tramway into the foreground of the shot, and I think I'm probably just being too clever for my own good, and then the light levels have just rapidly sort of disappeared altogether. I mean, I don't know if you can see, but there's some clouds sort of down low on the horizon there, so it's played absolutely havoc with me, and yeah, I've become a bit stressed, and that's never good with landscape photography. So instead I've decided to focus on something a lot more simple, just using my 24-70 at 70mm, focusing in to the pylons you can see behind me as they go off into the distance and then kink to the right, using a 16:9 crop on that. And really the whole left of the image is dominated by snow, but then the right of the image, there's a kind of a snowless landscape out that direction, so there's a real big contrast between each side of the image. And then we're getting the sun setting there with the spine of hills that run down the middle of the island. So overall it works quite nicely. It's just those clouds are playing havoc at the moment and they're cutting out the best light, but I've got a sneaking suspicion we're going to get one last burst of light because there's a little gap in the cloud just on the horizon. So I think if it's going to arrive, it's going to arrive imminently. This image has turned out far better than I expected. The simplicity and diagonal contrast in the scene work well, and I particularly like the interplay between the sun, clouds and hills, which coincides with the glistening tramway winding out of sight. I also love the tiny little car caught by complete fluke, giving scale to the landscape. Just like the Blue Hour image earlier in the video, this shot is focus stacked and exposure blended. The first image focused down on the foreground rails, and the second on the distant tramway. I slightly overexposed these two shots to avoid the common trap of underexposing snowy scenes. I additionally shot 1 and 3 stop underexposures of the sky to help control the extreme dynamic range in that part of the scene. levels are starting to drop quite dramatically and I can't feel my fingertips. So it's definitely time to move on, I think. But just have a look at the sky behind me there. The colours are absolutely amazing. It really, really is. I kind of regret leaving the mountain summit up there because I think there could have been some amazing shooting opportunities, because when you get colours like this, the snow reflects and captures those hues just beautifully. It really does. You can probably pick that up in the footage. It really is amazing out here. But I think that's it for today's video. Before I freeze to death up here, I need to get back to the car. So if you've got any thoughts on the images I did manage to capture, pop them below in the comments. And this video will be going out after Christmas, so I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a very merry belated Christmas, and it definitely will be my last video for 2020. So I will wish you all a very, very happy and prosperous 2021. It can't possibly be any shitter than 2020. Take care.